Hello and welcome. I'm Uday Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX World. Let's take a quick look at the top stories this hour. Iran's Foreign Minister Arakchi has vowed relentless retaliation, saying Iran's armed forces will continue to strike those responsible for the attacks on its people until they pay for their criminal aggression. He also warned Israeli citizens to follow evacuation orders and stay away from military and intelligence sites ahead of further strikes. Russian President Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping slam Israel's attacks on Iran as illegal. Both also called for urgent de-escalation. Both the leaders agree that there is no military solution to the crisis. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vows to eliminate Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile threat, calling it a mission to prevent nuclear annihilation. Speaking from Beersheba, where a hospital was hit by an Iranian missile, he said Israel is actively working to remove both threats. Gaza's civil defense says Israeli strikes have killed at least 72 people in a single day, including 21 near an aid distribution site in central Gaza. On the other hand, the Israeli army claims troops fired only warning shots at suspects in the area, but says it is unaware of any injuries. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has rejected NATO's proposed 5% defense spending target, calling it unreasonable and counterproductive. In a letter to NATO chief Mark Rutte, Sanchez expressed strong reservations just days before the alliance summit. Ukraine returns a new batch of prisoners of war from Russia following a deal reached in Istanbul as the swap process continues. The exchange includes young and severely wounded soldiers and forms part of a larger agreement involving the swap of thousands of prisoners and remains of soldiers. Thai PM Shinawatra faces a political crisis after a leaked call with Cambodia's Hun Sen sparks outrage and splits her coalition. She apologizes for the audio, which shows her calling the Cambodian leader uncle and appearing to dismiss a Thai military chief. Budapest's Liberal mayor vows to go ahead with the city's Pride March on the 28th of June despite a police ban under new anti-LGBTQ+ legislation. He insists the event is a municipal gathering that requires no police approval, challenging a law passed by the Hungarian Prime Minister that allows such bans and use of facial recognition on participants. Day 7 of the escalating Iran-Israel conflict continues to raise international alarm as tensions soar. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping have spoken today, jointly condemning Israel's military actions. Both leaders called for a ceasefire and emphasized diplomacy. Russia warned the United States against military action, calling it an extremely dangerous step. Xi said armed force is not the way to resolve disputes and urged Israel to stop hostilities to avoid regional escalation. Overnight, Israel struck Iran's Arak heavy water reactor linked to its nuclear program and multiple missile launch sites in western Iran. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has said the strikes would intensify and claimed Iran's supreme leader can no longer be allowed to exist. Prime Minister Netanyahu has vowed to exact the full price for ongoing Iranian attacks. Speaking from Beersheba, he reaffirmed Israel's commitment to eliminating Iran's nuclear and missile threats. Here's what the Israeli Prime Minister had to say.
Our goal is twofold. Nuclear, ballistic missile, we're going to remove we are in the process of completing removing this threat. We are committed to destroying the nuclear threat, the threat of a nuclear annihilation against Israel.
Well, in response, Iran launched a new wave of missiles towards Israel. The Israeli army has confirmed sirens sounded in the north following the attack. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has also posted a defiant message on X, warning Israel to follow evacuation orders and stay away from military sites. He's declared Iran's armed forces will continue to strike the criminals responsible for targeting Iranian civilians. Iran also arrested 24 people accused of spying for Israel and spreading disinformation to damage the Islamic Republic's image. Andrew KP Leung is joining us live, a China strategist. He's live, in fact, from Hong Kong with us. Welcome. Thank you for being with us today on NewsX World, Andrew. How do you view this latest turn that the conflict has taken? Obviously, escalation has been warned now by Israel. They say that this is an unprecedented attack on a hospital. They are now directly blaming Khamenei for it. Do you see further escalation in the next 24 hours, looking at these latest statements from both sides? Andrew, can you hear me?
Yes. I thought you were asking me, but someone was speaking, you see.
Okay.
Anyway,
can you hear me?
I think that this is...
Are you able to hear me, Andrew?
In the a crisis over Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has been increasingly emboldened to seek a greater end game. Originally started off with eradicating Hamas. He is already destroying the proxy forces supporting Iran, the Houthis, and also Hezbollah in Syria, and also controlling a lot of strategic assets in Syria. But now he seems to be seeking not only to eradicate Hamas, but also to eradicate Iran, because Iran has always been the greatest existential threat to Israel. I mean, it's not just recent years, it's over decades. And it is the confrontation of Iran that has been part and parcel of Israel's militarization, including its possession of nuclear weapons. But this time around, it sees that Iran has been sufficiently gravely weakened, because all these proxy forces, the Houthis to a certain extent, but definitely Hezbollah, and to a large extent Hamas, have been weakened. And Israel has also been assassinating the top military leaders in Iran and trying to foment social unrest in Iran with the hope of overthrowing its government. However, the existential threat for Israel is the possession of nuclear facilities, which are said to be on the verge of developing a nuclear weapon. And hence, Israel has been planning for this attacks for a long time. And its military, of course, has been hugely advanced with the support of weaponry by the United States. And now he seems to be targeting Iran's most secret and most precious nuclear facilities buried deep in the mountains. And they can be reached, according to their intelligence, only by employing the American special bombs weighing 30,000 pounds, the so-called bunker buster bombs. However, Israel doesn't have the aircraft or the bombers which are capable of carrying these bombs. And then the only bomber that can do so is the B-52 by the United States. And Trump recently has signaled that he has authorized the direct involvement of the U.S. Air Force in the war without giving the final go-ahead and asking Iran openly to surrender unconditionally. And of course, the Iran leadership refuses to buckle, refuses to cover in the courts of American aggression. And then, of course, Iran has just displayed its 200 miles special mid-range missiles that can hit Israel's the capital and many other different assets. So the prospects for
we are also seeing a phone call, Andrew, that has taken place between, of course, various international leaders. They're all deliberating, of course, on this conflict and what is a way to de-escalate for both sides. Amidst all of this, we've also heard statements from Russia and China. How do you react to the positions that China and Russia have taken on this conflict, where they're clearly, of course, calling out Israel's actions as illegal?
Well, of course, I think that both for Russia and China, it destroyed Iran is doing a lot of damage to their coalition, because according to the early warning to Americans, foreign policy doyen, the late Brzezinski, in his epical tome called The Grand Chessboard, published in 2000, published in 1997. On page 50 of that book, he already warned that the most lethal coalition against American hegemony is a coalition between Russia, China, and Iran. And now with Iran, if Iran is being weakened, this coalition it would be much more is greatly affected, and hence the Russia and China do not want to see Iran, which is destroyed, apart from the prospects for escalation, because if the Iran retaliates with missiles, and of course that with even other attacks, this could spiral into a regional war, which does not augur well for stability in the region or for the world. And hence both countries, Russia and China, are supporting negotiations as a means to resolve the crisis. And that call for negotiation rather than military coercion is supported by the international community, by European countries and by other countries in the world, who do not believe that anything, the world's problems will be solved by unilateral action. And indeed, this is the principle underpinned by the UN Charter, that countries involved in conflict to seek negotiations. But unfortunately, this method has been cast aside in favor of military aggression, which has its
okay, we're getting further breaking news now coming in this hour. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has called on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to adopt a moderate and controlled approach in Iran. In a phone call earlier today, Merz emphasized the need for restraint and careful decision-making. A German government source confirmed the conversation, highlighting Berlin's focus on stability and responsible leadership. Andrew Leung is live with us on this story. Andrew, how do you react to this phone call that has transpired between the German Chancellor and the Israeli Prime Minister?
Well, I think that you see, I was referring to these bunker-busting bombs to be carried by B-52 bombers. But then, of course, Iran could also seek a way to obtain missiles that can threaten the B-52 bombers. And of course, the B-52 bombers is a valuable asset. And of course, if one is shot down, this would blow a hole in Americans' military credibility. And that explains President Trump's hesitancy in giving the final word go ahead. But then, who knows? I mean, no one can tell what President Trump is going to do, because he may well believe that the missiles couldn't reach the B-52, and even before they do, the Iranian nuclear facilities would be totally destroyed, and that would eliminate the only challenger of Israeli hegemony in the Middle East. And the Israeli hegemony in the Middle East is important for the serving of Americans' interests, because the United States can thereby control the whole of the Middle East, regardless of course, having destroyed Iran and threatening other Middle East countries.
Yes.
But that, of course, that would not be supported by the Arab world.
Andrew Ling, thank you very much for joining us with your perspective on that story. Meanwhile, Ukraine has secured the release of a group of prisoners of war in its latest exchange with Russia. President Vladimir Zelensky has confirmed today, while the number of those freed was not disclosed. Kyiv's Coordination Council for Prisoners of War stated that the group included injured and ill individuals, many of whom had been held since the early months of Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. President Zelensky reiterated his commitment to bringing every Ukrainian home, thanking all those involved in facilitating the exchange. Meanwhile, tensions continue to escalate as Ukraine marks 100 days since Russia rejected a United States-backed proposal for a complete ceasefire. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha accused Moscow of intensifying hostilities. Instead of seizing the opportunity to end the conflict, he called on Ukraine's international partners to increase pressure through sanctions and continued military aid, insisting that the time to act is now. Despite proposals from the West and Ukraine's stated readiness for peace, Russia has set conditions and maintained a hardline stance, further complicating efforts to reach a resolution. Gilbert Dvorkovich, Russian affairs expert, is joining us live from Brussels. Gilbert, thank you for being with us on NewsX World. Prisoner exchanges, of course, continue between the two sides, but have we reached any closer to any sort of peace deal, or is that still a while away?
The exchange of prisoners is a positive development, which we all can praise. It shows that the discussions that were held in 2 sessions in Istanbul have produced some results at the technical level. I say technical level, that is what the negotiators consider this. At the human level, the families, the loved ones of those who have been returned, of course, can take great pleasure in seeing them once again. Nonetheless, and to answer your question, this development has no bearing on the conclusion of a truce, not to mention conclusion of a peace treaty. And Mr. Zelensky's remarks criticizing Russia for spending 100 days resisting the conclusion of the peace or a ceasefire is utter nonsense. He is repeating the same remarks everywhere that he goes. He is looking for financial and military aid wherever he goes. And as we just saw in the past week, when he was attending the G7 conference in Alberta, he's getting nothing.
Yes. Also, of course, now, do you believe that with countries, different countries across the world's attention being towards the Iran-Israel conflict, that is going to delay some sort of efforts to continue the talks between Russia and Ukraine, or do you believe those will happen simultaneously?
Well, as they broke off following the second meeting in Istanbul, there was no prospect of any progress because both sides were demanding that the other side capitulate. Now, that is an impossible situation. It expresses the utter irrealism of Mr. Zelensky's position, the utter rejection of the real situation on the ground, battlefield, by his European backers. It is not supported, his position is not supported by Donald Trump, which is the main reason why Trump left the G7 meeting early. And that is of decisive importance because despite all the rhetoric coming out of the European institutions, leaders, mainly the foreign minister, one can call her Kallas, and the chairman of the commission, von der Leyen, there is no prospect of Europe saving Ukraine. They don't have the materiel, they don't have the money, and they don't have the will. So Mr. Zelensky's hopes for European salvation are completely misplaced. As for the United States, so long as Mr. Trump is in control, and that is, of course, always open to question because he has many enemies, but so long as he is in control, Zelensky will get nothing.
All right, more news that we're tracking this hour. Gilbert, I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us on the broadcast. All right, for the first time in over a decade, all NATO countries are set to meet the alliance's 2% GDP defense spending target this year, a milestone confirmed by NATO chief Mark Rutte at the G7 summit in Canada. Canada and Portugal were the last members to come on board earlier this month. The focus is already shifting at next week's NATO summit in The Hague. Leaders will be discussing a more ambitious goal, a 5% GDP target, split between core defense and broader security investments. Now, while Sweden is fully committed to the new 5% benchmark, Spain is pushing back. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has labelled the target unreasonable and counterproductive for his country, signalling early divisions within the alliance ahead of the summit. The coming days will be crucial as NATO tries to balance military readiness with economic realities. Well, we have now joining us, in fact, Ross Finegold, political analyst, live from Taipei. Ross, thank you for being with us. How do you react to the fact that NATO members now are going to be meeting this defense spending goal?
It's certainly going to be contentious. President Trump is going to put a lot of pressure on the NATO members to achieve the 5% goal. It seems like Secretary General Rutte is also on board with the 5%, but obviously, as you explained, certain countries in the last day or two, Spain most notably, are not on board with this. So it's going to be a NATO leaders summit with a lot of disagreement, and probably some ill will result from this meeting, and they may not come to a consensus yet.
Absolutely. Also, Ross, if we talk now about this milestone, of course, what does it really mean for their defense capability as well moving forward?
One of the problems with a good number of the NATO countries, including the ones that we think of or traditionally have thought of as premier military powers like the United Kingdom, but ever since the Cold War, their investment in their national defense has really, frankly, deteriorated. And it would be very difficult for a number of the European militaries, including the major powers like the UK or France, to fight a war, whether that was a land war or a sea war or an air war. And we see how difficult it is, how long it takes for them to provide aid to Ukraine simply because they didn't even have weapons or ammunition in their own inventory. And then when they were asked to give some of it up to Ukraine, they're worried about how to replace it. So the fact remains, and I think the United States, whether it's President Biden or President Trump now, is correct to put pressure on the other NATO members to significantly increase their military spending. And I'm speaking here from Asia Pacific, where, of course, there's the potential for war between Western nations and China, whether that's over Taiwan or the disputes in the South China Sea or for other reasons. But at the moment, there's no European country that really could assist the United States if there was a war in the Indo-Pacific region. So we're back to that core point, which is for the European countries, the NATO members, to significantly increase their national defense spending.
Ross, this goal has been met. Now it seems that NATO is going to set another goal, 5%. However, they're not enough takers, it seems, for that. Spain and a couple of other countries may actually be opposed to that new goal.
That's right. That's why I said this meeting might be contentious and it might fail to reach a consensus. But that doesn't mean the United States is going to back down. And if the meeting next week is contentious, I think we should be prepared to see a very angry President Trump. I don't know if he'll leave early like he did from the G7 meeting. We can't rule that out. But he'll take to his favorite method, which is social media, and he's going to call out those NATO members that don't want to raise their defense spending to 5%.
All right, Ross Finegold, thank you very much for joining us with your perspective on that story. And that's all the time we have for. We will continue to bring more news and updates from around the world. Stay tuned.